Not one, but two former occupants of number 10 have now condemned the Prime Minister's decision to suspend Parliament. But Mr Johnson said that MPs trying to block a no-deal departure were damaging his chances of getting a deal with the EU. Scotland's highest civil court refused another legal bid by parliamentarians to order a temporary halt to prorogation, but did agree to a full hearing on the matter next week. From Westminster, here's our correspondent, Victoria MacDonald.
Hi, good morning. Hello, good morning, good morning, good morning.
You know you're getting old when even the journalists start looking young.
I have a mini Boris that's made out of Lego and plastic.
The Prime Minister took questions from these school reporters ahead of an announcement of £14 billion for the education budget.
I'm an Arsenal fan. I think Arsenal will do well this season.
Right.
What makes you feel you'll have a good year this year?
Right.
We will tell you his response later. But after this session, he sat down for brief interviews with other broadcasters except Channel 4 News and was asked how worried he was about attempts to block him from a no-deal Brexit.
It's vital that our EU friends don't constantly think at the back of their minds, this thing could be blocked in Parliament. There's no way that the Brexit can be thwarted anyway. If they think Brexit can be blocked anyway, they're not going to give us the deal we need.
This interview was given before the former Prime Minister John Major announced that he wants to join the court action next week by the anti-Brexit campaigner Gina Miller to prevent the shutting down of Parliament. He said in a statement, "I promised that if the Prime Minister prorogued Parliament in order to prevent members from opposing his Brexit plans, I would seek judicial review of his action." This was delightedly described by some commentators as blue on blue. The Prime Minister has ordered a suspension of Parliament for up to 5 weeks before a Queen's speech on October the 14th.
What Boris Johnson has done by calling this very lengthy prorogation in the middle of a political crisis is in effect ignoring the conventions and the precedents. So that's pushing it into the courts. It's pushing us in the direction of a legal constitution, which is more like what most other countries have. So what he's done is unprecedented, and we could see potentially unprecedented action by the courts to stop him.
In the first round, however, the Scottish court today rejected a request to immediately block that suspension, though it has agreed to a full hearing on Tuesday with a similar case to be heard in Northern Ireland. And in the meantime, a second former Prime Minister, this time Gordon Brown, said following talks with several senior EU leaders, he believed the European Union will withdraw the October 31st Brexit deadline, and that could put pressure on Boris Johnson to reach a deal. Any suggestion, though, of a deal infuriated the Brexit Party, which warned they would hold the Prime Minister's feet to the fire if he does not go for a clean break.
If he's prepared to put country before party and to go for a clean break Brexit, which we believe is the right answer, the right solution, the best deal now, then we will help him, we will support him. We will not stand candidates against Conservative Party candidates if he's trying to do the right thing. If he wants to do the right thing, then we will do the right thing. But if he wants to reheat this withdrawal agreement, we will fight him in every seat to prevent that happening.
If you think this week has been a political rollercoaster, just wait until next week. That's when MPs return to the House of Commons, and when, as we understand it, those opposed to a no-deal Brexit will attempt to take control of the order papers and to, as Jeremy Corbyn put it, legislate rapidly. Which brings us back to the question from the young reporter about how the Prime Minister's year is looking. Boris Johnson said, not surprisingly, that he thinks he's going to have a good year. Once, he said, we get all this Brexit thing done.
Victoria MacDonald. Well, the SNP's Joanna led the legal challenge brought by 75 parliamentarians in Scotland's top civil court, seeking to block the Prime Minister's decision to suspend Parliament. I spoke to her earlier and began by asking her if she's looking at the courts to solve problems where politicians can't.
No, we're looking at the courts to review the exercise of power by the executive and to prevent the executive from shutting down Parliament. So it's quite the opposite of what you say, Matt. What we're trying to do is make sure that Parliament sits for the planned length of time so that it can carry out the scrutiny of Brexit envisaged in acts of Parliament such as the EU Withdrawal Act.
Despite the suspension of Parliament, you do have a few days to get your act together. Do you think you can?
Well, clearly what the legal actions are seeking to do is to prevent Parliament from being suspended. But in the meantime, I and others are working cross-party to hatch a strategy for next week to make best use of the time that we have. So all is not lost, but the importance of the court actions is to review the legality of the Prime Minister's actions in effectively shutting down Parliament for reasons that are now in the public domain. I mean, the cat's out of the bag, given what the Defence Secretary said off camera, and indeed given interviews that Boris Johnson himself has given. The reason for shutting down Parliament is he knows he can't get his way while Parliament's sitting, so he shut it down. Now, that's the sort of thing that happens in unelected dictatorships, not in one of the oldest democracies in the world.
Gordon Brown, the former Prime Minister, said today that the United Kingdom was now in peril. For you, this is a bit of an opportunity, isn't it?
Well, the United Kingdom is in peril, and even if we manage to sort this mess out and to restore democracy at Westminster and to prevent a hard Brexit, Scots have looked on in horror at the events of the last 3 years. And as a series of opinion polls have recently shown, if there were to be another independence referendum, the majority of people would vote yes.
Despite all the outrage, the developments in London this week are, for the Scottish National Party, a blessing in disguise, aren't they?
A blessing in disguise for Scotland. Well, a hard Brexit could never be described as a blessing in disguise for Scotland, nor could a no-deal Brexit be described as a blessing in disguise, because the Scottish economy and Scottish society will take massive hits. And it won't be rich people like Boris Johnson and his chums that suffer. It will be my working class constituents in Edinburgh South West who will suffer job losses and food shortages and medicine shortages.
But it gives you a much stronger case for independence. So I'm keen to prevent that from happening. But the fact of the matter, Matt, is that the case for independence exists independently of a no-deal Brexit. The case for independence exists because the events of the last 3 years since the European Union referendum have shown that Scotland is not an equal partner in the European Union. Scotland is not an equal partner in the United Kingdom. Scotland's views and Scotland's voice is not respected, and that the Westminster Parliament can run roughshod over Holyrood when it so wishes. Joanna there of the SNP. Well, in a short while we'll be speaking live to Lord Heseltine, but a little earlier I spoke to Andrew Bridgen, a member of the European Research Group, the ERG of the Conservative Party. I began by asking him if John Major is still a Conservative in his book.
I think it's disappointing that John Major's taking this action when he's actually the last Prime Minister who actually used prorogation for political purposes to avoid some sort of political scandal. But John Major can do what he wishes. The fact is we've now got a Prime Minister who's determined to get us out of the European Union, deliver on the mandate of the referendum, and he's got the guts to do it.
So if he does get a deal out of Brussels, will he support him come what may?
I'd have to look at the deal. I applaud his efforts to get the backstop removed from the withdrawal agreement, but there's far from just the backstop that's wrong with the current withdrawal agreement. What I want, and I believe Boris Johnson wants, is a Super Canada-style free trade agreement. I think we can have that by triggering GATT 24, offering a quota and tariff-free trade for 10 years while we enter into detailed and comprehensive talks for a free trade agreement with the European Union, which will be the biggest customer for EU goods. 70% of all their exports should come to the UK after we leave.
But if he comes back from Brussels with something less than that, are you still prepared to pull the plug on Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, as you did on Theresa May?
I would have to have a long and very pragmatic look at whatever Boris Johnson comes back with. But at the end of the day, he'll come back with whatever the European Union are willing to give us.
Now, Boris Johnson, as we all know, voted for Theresa May's deal the third time round. Do you actually trust him?
Boris is a political realist. He knows as well as I do what's required of the Conservative government. We've got to deliver on the mandate and leave the European Union. We've already missed 2 deadlines, and the country has noticed. You've seen how we dropped in the polls at the European elections, and you've seen since Boris has taken a more Eurosceptic line than his predecessor, how we've risen in the polls. We're heading for a general election. I think in the next 9 months, we have to have left the European Union, and Boris understands that.
If that Parliament votes to extend the deadline to delay Brexit yet again, should Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, ignore Parliament?
Parliament can't, as far as I can see, force the Prime Minister to ask for an extension. We have a Parliament, I think, that's a bit out of touch with the electorate. Only 160 MPs in our Parliament actually campaigned to leave, and 52% of the population voted to leave. At the end of the day, Boris Johnson is going to call the shots.
Andrew Bridgen, thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your holiday.
Well, by the time this goes out, I shall already be at the airport on my way back to the UK, so you can rest assured that democracy will be secured when I get back.